Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
There is at least one more sliver of peace in the land of Israel this week. There was exceedingly good news with the rescue of one of the hostages that has been held for these 10 months in the horrors of Gaza. Did everybody see this story?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Does anybody remember who it was that was rescued?
Bedouin.
Druids.
No. It was Kaid Farhan Al-Qadi,
Yeah.
an Israeli citizen.
Yeah.
Now, in detail, yes, he happens to be a Bedouin, but that is a very important thing that we make sure we get right when we are considering the deliverance that he has now experienced. And to highlight exactly what I'm going for here, I'd like to point out, the opposite point of view. He was being held by Hamas, of course, during this time period. But what do we know about Bedouins? What do we know about Mr. Al-Qadi? He's Muslim, right? He is not Jewish. Yes, he is Israeli, meaning that he is within the land of Israel, and his family was there at the time of the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. And as a member of that country, he has a passport that is Israeli, but he certainly shares a language and a faith with those that were holding him captive. Why were they holding him captive then?
It's a symbol.
As a symbol, but as a symbol of what? If their symbology of their battle, written into their own charter, is that they are fighting against the colonial, settler, oppressor, white Jewish people, what does a poor Muslim man who was just working as a guard in a packing house have to do with that cause? How in the world is he responsible for what they believe to be the foreign invasion of these Jews that took over the... He was, if anything, one of the occupied. He is from a family that was already there, by their definition, indigenous. Slippery term at the best of times, but certainly by Hamas's definition, he would count as one of the descendants of the indigenous population. And yet, they felt it necessary not only to abduct him, but once having abducted him and realizing who he was, to still hold on to him for 10 months, despite him being a symbol of the victimhood that they believe they are fighting for. Do we see the incongruity here? Do we see the craziness here?
It's
But
less crazy than you think.
It's less crazy than you think. It's only crazy. It only creates cognitive dissonance if you accept at face value the stated goals of Hamas. If you accept at face value that their stated goals is to liberate the land so that all people can be free from these colonial Zionist oppressors, yada yada, then of course this makes no sense at all. But if you recognize that as a terrorist organization, like any other terrorist organization in the world, whether it be in the Middle East or whether it be in any other continent, their primary goal is not actually to achieve the liberation of their people. Their primary goal is to achieve the continuation of their own power over whatever piece of land they currently are able to exert dominance over. And that means that everyone should be under their control, and everyone becomes a symbol of their power, and if they can parlay those people into a bargaining chip, then they will do so, because their own continued authority and power is more important than actually fulfilling what is the stated aim of their charter. Bernie, you have something to add?
Yeah, but actually he was somewhat of a piece of bait. and he was in the tunnel, and he was behind closed doors, and he was enunciating, "Don't shoot me, don't shoot me," to people who had mighty powerful guns.
Yes.
And so the response of those soldiers in previous times have been to go ahead and shoot.
Because you never know what enemy is on the other side of that door.
Right. And so he was like a piece of bait to see if they could get him to be murdered.
Yes, to use the IDF as the instrument of their own assassination of this man that they had taken for no good reason.
Right.
And indeed, this holding of him captive is parallel to what they are doing with the entirety of the Gaza Strip.
Sure.
Is they are holding not only those that they took across the border captive within Gaza, they are holding their own citizens captive within Gaza. Any self-respecting group at this point would have either left the territory or would have allowed themselves to be turned over, because clearly they are bringing too much death and destruction by their continued presence. And indeed, even the PLO, not that they are a high watermark of morality in the past, would often leave areas in order to somewhat diminish the civilian casualties. But if your goal is to stay in power, and if power is only accrued by making others outraged by the triggered atrocities of your enemy, then keeping Al-Qadi or keeping your own civilians in a vulnerable position makes perfect sense. But there's a reason why his name comes so easy to us. Because those of you that have been here since October 7th know that we have been praying for his release along with everyone else since October 7th. He's not Jewish. Right? He is not Jewish. If he was here, he'd be welcome to our sanctuary, but we wouldn't count him in the minyan, and he wouldn't get an aliyah for Shabbat because he is not a Jewish person. However, we have been praying for his release. Why? Well, because nobody deserves to go through what Hamas is putting these people through. Whether they are Jewish or not, whether they are Israeli or not, which is why you've probably also noticed when we go through the list of those who are still being held captive, we continue to enunciate, in my own mangled fashion, I am sure, the names of those that are foreign workers, that are neither Israeli nor Jewish, but were swept up in Hamas's raid and are still being held captive in Gaza. Hamas may treat them as bargaining chips. Hamas may treat them as just one more lever to pull to try and get different responses from the international media community or from the donors that they are hoping to solicit from. But we look at them alongside our Jewish brothers and sisters, alongside the citizens of Israel, Jewish or not Jewish, that are being held captive, and say, you too deserve our prayers. You are alongside us, and we are with you in this horrible time. And we pray for their release, along with the release of anyone else. I have said many times, but I will keep repeating it because the world doesn't seem to be paying attention. But in Judaism, we have a very simple pattern. We begin, of course, by praying for ourselves and praying for our families. And having prayed for ourselves and our families, we then pray for our community. And having prayed for our community, we pray for our city, we pray for our country, and we pray eventually through every hierarchy that you might have for the world, for all that are in God's creation. And I will say again, if somewhere in someone's heart they draw a line and say, I will pray for these people, but not those, though they may suffer similar to myself or my own people, then they have missed the point of God's creation. If you are going to divide a line and say, I'm sorry, you're the wrong religion. You have the wrong passport. You have the wrong color. You have the wrong sexual identity. You have the wrong job, the wrong political affiliation. If I am going to draw a line and say, therefore, I will not pray for you, then you have missed God's point. God is telling us that, yes, our opening of our heart begins with ourselves, our family, and our community, that which is most accessible, we hope, to ourselves. But it must never stop there. And we can see the stark difference between what we demonstrate by praying for all of those that are still being held captive and what Hamas has demonstrated by betraying those that they claim to be working on behalf of. Let us make sure that we do not allow those lines to take root in our own heart. We can condemn Hamas, but we must also ensure for ourselves that we are not separating the world into different categories, some of whom are worthy of our prayers and others are only worthy of our scorn. We, of course, must work, we must fight, but all deserve our prayers. Shabbat Shalom.